Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
Mark, Dilexi Te, the first Apostolic Exhortation from Pope Leo XIV. Now, yes. I know that you had an early copy, or maybe you didn't.
You didn't. Who knows?
But
I have read it.
Either way, you grabbed it as soon as you could. And you've been pouring through it, and you're about to load on our website, catholicunscripted.com, some commentary on that in the form of an article. But we're just jumping in now to give us your first thoughts.
Yeah, so I've spent quite a few hours reading it, and I've made notes as I've gone along. So that should allow me to put up quite a detailed analysis on the website. Yes, so that's it. Or it's on the Vatican website now, so if you want to read it, you can read it. If you're that desperate for a laugh, sort of thing. So it's called Dilexi Te, and he signed it on the 4th of October, the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. It's Latin for "I have loved you," or more literally, "I loved you." And this is kind of a part 2, if you like, of Pope Francis's last encyclical, which was Dilexit Nos, which is Latin for "He loved us," which was actually one of the better things that Pope Francis did. It wasn't absolutely dreadful. The subtitle for that was on the human and divine love of the heart of Jesus Christ. So it was kind of a meditation on the Sacred Heart, and it was all right. It wasn't awful. So this new document that we've got now.
Give us a general overview, and before diving into maybe highlights, good bits, and then slightly concerning elements. So an overall picture.
I don't think there's massively concerning elements. It really is a Francis document, and it's about the poor. So like, to be honest with you, the first sort of 75% of it, I just was wondering why, what it was all for. And he goes, Pope Leo goes through the sort of the history of the church, and there are some quite interesting bits in it about, like, he sort of tries to align Jesus with a poor person, which I'm not sure works particularly well, if I'm honest. He sort of says that Jesus is poor in terms of his kenosis. You know what that means? He emptied himself.
Yeah,
exactly. But he says, I think it's in paragraph 19, he says poverty marked every aspect of Jesus's life. But I'm not sure that's consistent with the biblical evidence, to be honest, because Joseph was, as we know, a carpenter, like tekton, like a house builder. And where he goes on trips to Jerusalem for the Passover, which is, something he obviously had spare time and money to do, that sort of thing. And Nazareth was a small but sort of strategically located village near Sepphoris, which was a bustling Roman city, which was under reconstruction at the time. So there would have been steady work for builders like Joseph. And I think a lot of people in the biblical tradition would say that tradespeople like that were sort of in a middle stratum, with access to subsistence and, sort of occasional extras, like above sort of the 50 to 80% of the urban population, like excluding the slaves. So,
but even
I don't know. Like, so straight away you sort of feel like he's trying to sell you some snake oil, don't you?
Well, because poverty is quite an ambiguous term that has different meanings in different contexts. So who are and what is the poor in a Western context versus, let's say, an Eastern or a South American context? It's going to mean different things in India than it does, absolute poverty or relative poverty. So what do we mean by poor? And also the modern idea of poor, people immediately think money or no money, whereas it needs much more. Well, I don't know. Tell me what you think. Do you think it was adequately dealt with, the question over what we mean by poverty?
No, and that's the big, if there's a problem, that's really the biggest problem. It's like he's going on about the poor and you're just reading it thinking, well, who are you talking about? If you've got a £500,000 mortgage, you know, and a dozen kids to feed, are you more poor than someone who lives in a wooden shack in the forest and doesn't do anything all day? You know, what about the sort of the global, you know, we're living in a country where we've got second and third generation of people who are living on benefits, you know, under this welfare state. It's like a substratum of society. Are they poor or rich? You know, they've all got LCD TVs, 20 Benson and Edges, and a brand new pair of Nike trainers all the time, you know, because they're being paid for by the state. So is that poverty? I don't know. And then it's a completely unnuanced vision of what the poor is, you know. And like he starts off by saying in quite a beautiful way that, and then he loses. So he starts off with this idea that it's the poor in spirit, you know, that it's God empties himself and comes down to be incarnate with the poor of, you know, us, because we're poor and our poverty is death. You know, that is the poverty. And that's what he comes to save us from. I was like, oh, well, that's, you know, really theologically sound. But then he sort of starts going on about, like, the two ideas seem to be completely conflated. And I mean, it's really incredible that the unborn aren't mentioned in it. If you want to talk about poverty, they don't seem to be mentioned in it at all. Like, so that's really confusing. And, you know, all the way through the document, I just found myself saying, you know, like there's a bit where he talks about welcoming strangers into your home for meals and stuff, and that seems very unqualified sort of a thing. If you've got children, and there's no nuance and there's no church teaching, there's no expression of what Jesus is saying in these parables that he uses to teach us about like money, you know. And Pope Leo talks about, so you could say you can easily pick out the bits that are by Francis and the bits that are by Leo.
Right.
It feels like Leo has padded it a great deal with, I mean, it's not that you'd need to pad Francis, would you? I mean, that was one of the things, was that his stuff was so verbose, you know, there was so much verbosity to it. But
yeah, why use 2 words when you can use 42?
Well, precisely, that's exactly his style. But there's a lot of stuff about the saints and church fathers, which is brilliant. You know, that's really good and welcome, because Francis didn't do that. He only ever referred to himself. The Aparathida document, you know, there's like a few things that and bishops' conferences. That's sort of all that he ever referred to in his documents. So this is much better. It's much richer. It's got, you know, but there's like a bit where he goes, I mean, there's so much to it. So there's this long trawl through all this information about what the church did about the poor. But like, that's a different poor to what we've got now. You know, like, what kind of poor are you talking about there? I really don't understand. Yeah. It's not very clear. Are we talking about the poor in spirit now? Are we talking about people who live in favelas and slums? You know, there's very little clarity to that discussion. There's a section then where he starts talking about Vatican II, and it literally, my notes are like, he's saying that we need to go back to this church from 1962. It's literally like saying, oh, in Vatican II, they saw what the problem was. Paul the, you know, Sixth saw what the problem was, and he, you know, put out this idea. And it's like, but the church, Holy Father, the church has changed, you know, in those years so much. We can't be looking at the same socio-economic model that we were in 1962 and saying that the solutions that the church had there were, and there's no analysis of the way that what was taught then was adopted. Was it adopted? He's not saying we adopted this amount of what was said, and then we didn't adopt this, and this would have sorted it out. There doesn't seem to be any sort of what's the word? Analysis. You know, there doesn't seem to be very much analysis of that sort of thing at all.
Well, that brings me to ask, who do you think it's aimed at? Because without wishing to sound simplistic, to write a document saying to Christians care for the poor seems Like, yeah, we've always known that, haven't we? So does it have a sense of being written almost for the super rich to give them a telling off, but they're not going to be reading it anyway?
No, well, that's it. Not really. That's exactly one of the things that I thought about it. Who's it aimed at? Is it aimed at Elon Musk? But if it is, he's not going to read it. And it doesn't. It's not constructed as an argument in that sort of way. So it really is difficult to say. Another really sort of bit of a worrying thing is that it's got this thing about popular movements, right? Is that anything that you're familiar with? Does it mean anything to you if I said popular movements?
Do you mean populist?
Right, well, there you go. See, that's what I thought straight away.
Yeah.
Like, is that what he's trying to say? But as you read on, no. So basically, this is a new thing, right? The Italian is a movimenti popolari. It was entered into the papal lexicon with Francis. So it doesn't appear in any documents before 2013.
Right.
And in Dilexi, it's got this warm attitude towards sort of what it means is like grassroots movements, and it calls them schools of social friendship. And it's kind of encouraging the hierarchy to listen to them rather than to fear them, which obviously closely follows that's obviously a Francis bit, I'd say, if you know what I mean. And I think it will sort of please social activists, but it's going to raise concern among those who are wary of politicized popular movements, So he sort of drifts into that sort of politics of Francis. But I think that is just purely a Francis bit repeating something that was in Fratelli Tutti. So what else can I say about it? So
you're talking about mercy and justice. If you want to say something about that there's this focus on mercy and justice, but without perhaps really saying how that looks.
Yeah, he talks about mercy and justice. He mentions it a few times, and I was like, oh, brilliant, here we go. Like Francis was all mercy, wasn't he? Well, let's have some justice. It's about time we had some justice, because the mercy was just an absolute mess. But it's not qualified. There isn't really any, like when he talks about justice, he's talking about socio-economic structures, really, which sounds really sort of, it's going to set everyone off it's going to set the Americans off on the he's a communist thing, I think, without a shadow of a doubt. So there's that whole bit, it's like section 84, 85, where he seems to be saying that we should return to a model of the church, which was, considered to be brilliant, a newfangled thing in 1962. But like that's 63 years ago, and then he goes on from there in like the next couple of paragraphs. He talks about Pope John Paul II's follow on from Vatican II, but it doesn't say how the church failed to take up that teaching or what's wrong now that needs to change or anything like that. And then he goes on from there. He goes on to sort of he attacks unbridled capitalism. But it's interesting to see whether the position that he puts forward is actually consistent with church teaching, which obviously attacks forms of collectivism like socialism, as well as unbridled capitalism. And I mean, we often say capitalism is, the worst system we've got apart from all the others. Tell us what we should be doing then, Holy Father. There's not really any mention of that. There is a really, really good bit in it where he talks about the way society. So this is the bit where I thought he'd mention abortion. And he talks about the way that our society is developing into a throwaway society. And I think, so he doesn't mention any of the things, but like euthanasia, we could say surrogacy, all of these things, you can see them in our culture. And, I was talking to Mum at dinner last night, my old mum, who, if you're regulars on the channel, you'd have seen her. We did a good chat about what life was like in Ireland in the 40s and 50s. But she was saying, she was in hospital and there was someone who was not very well, and they were just left, and they were 80, so they were just not attended to at all. They were just left. This is what the state of the NHS in the UK is like, unfortunately. And this comes on the back of another occasion where at the weekend, one of my wife's really close friends, her father was unfortunately knocked down by a car. And as a result of that, he died. So please do pray for him. But the saddest thing was that she's a nurse and they were in hospital and they just didn't do anything with him for 8 hours because he's 80, and the triage was that they wouldn't be able to save him. He had a head injury and he was bleeding, and the daughter had to, she was trying to help him, and it's just awful. But the point really that we're making is that the elderly are of no consequence now, and especially while we're introducing euthanasia in this country, what are we going to see? We're going to see more of this sort of thing, more of just like, don't worry about old people. Like, it's the attitude that we're developing. It's like a throwaway culture sort of attitude. So he does address that and says that the social structures that we need to put in place to address these things, but he seems to stop short of saying that it's the gospel really that is the antidote. Again and again, he doesn't really follow through with the idea that, like, you could write in extra notes to it to say, if people accept if there's a big bit about social structures and people living in poor environments and how that's detrimental to their health and well-being. Okay, totally agree. But how are we going to change that? Is it just to give them money? Because if they haven't transformed their hearts and their lives, if they're not focused on family, their children, building society, building culture, and this is what the church teaches. So there's no flow through from that idea. It's like saying, look at this thing is really bad. We need to do something about that. And that's how it feels to me. The whole document is like that. It's like, that's really bad, that is. And, someone should do something about it. I'm not sure what, though. Yeah, has anyone got any ideas?
Anyone? Do. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're the church. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very much like that. So, yeah, he goes on then towards the end of the document, he seems to articulate this idea of regeneration of environments a bit better, but there's a real disconnect between like an exhortation that decries social equalities and asks us to build a heaven here on earth. It's one of the tensions that I'm not sure he deals with very well. It's this like the poor. But if we're not defining who the poor are, if we're being sort of picky about who we're deciding are poor and who are not poor,
what are we meant to do with the poor?
Well, it's a very good question.
I mean, outside of what we've always known as Catholics, I mean, is it just as you said, there are no solutions? It's just saying.
No. Well, so he starts off with that. He starts like the bit that I always remember from the gospel, in Luke's gospel, is when the lady comes and washes Jesus's feet with the nard, or anoints him with the expensive ointment. And Judas says, we could have sold that and given the money to the poor. And Jesus replies and says, you'll have the poor, the poor will be with you always. And that is the truth. So the poor, there's a very good explanation of the fact that the poor have been given to us for our benefit, that we learn from the poor, that as much as, it's our job to share the gospel with them, we're evangelized by the poor. It's our interaction with poor people. Whoever, I hate saying it because I grew up in
we might fall under it at various times in our lives, and it might not be when we're materially poor. But as you know, I ran a business a few years ago, and at that time I felt like I was doing all right, but I wasn't rich. I wasn't rich. I wouldn't say I was rich. I didn't have a massive mansion or anything like that, or
but I wasn't struggling to pay the bills perhaps as much as I am now. So like, you know, it's kind of really a relative thing, isn't it, being poor, you know? And I think, you know, that there's a name for that, being debt poor, isn't there? Where you've got a lot of debt, and like that's a real Western thing.
That's actually something that he could have addressed. I don't know if he did, and I'll be totally honest, viewers. I have not poured through the document as Mark has, so he's the man in the know. But a real problem, I think, is this system of usury, this system that we are enslaved by. The fact that we are, let's say here in the UK, and I'm sure it's the same across many countries in the West, we are pushed in a certain route, and you almost don't question it. You will have babies, put them into childcare, be monetarily incentivized to do so, apprised of your advantages from getting the kids into education. The kids are then brainwashed in education. They then go into universities where some more brainwashing takes place and get into more debt. And then we set them out on the path of adult life as infants. You know, they're not adults. We set them out at 22, 23, when men should be in a position to propose to a woman to start a family with tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. And then they are enslaved by this, and they can't flourish under this system. House prices, you can't purchase a house, you can't manage a family. The only way that you can is by taking the hand of the state, taking the handout from the state in various tax reliefs or benefits. And you think, oh, isn't this great? On first glance, you think, isn't this great? I can get this benefit and that benefit and this benefit, and it's all free money. It's like I was laughing with someone after Mass on Sunday because they were saying about universities when they started tuition fees, and they said they were working in the university at the time, and they were talking about having a £3,000. Then there was a discussion about whether university should cap at £6,000, and then they agreed £9,000. And this university said, what we'll do is I think it was when it was 3, it said, we'll say £3,000, but we'll throw the books in for free. And everyone's like, oh yeah, free books. And I was like, that's hilarious. We're going to charge you £3,000 and give you £1,000 of books for free. And you think, we buy this stuff because we think, what a great deal, what a great bargain. And we don't see the chains that it's wrapping around us. Did he talk about the chains of debt, the way we're enslaved and wedded to the state? That's what needs to happen, is this uncoupling from the state so that we can flourish as families, so that we can grow families. All of that practical stuff that we can become, you know, have that true, know what freedom is for and have the freedom to flourish. That's what matters, more than we need this money and we need to take this money from Elon Musk and give it to impoverished people in sub-Saharan Africa, where, by the way, there are the highest rates of happiness, and we have the lowest rates of happiness in the West, where we've got the most money.
Yeah, this is exactly it. This is what really confused me, is that it is this, and I can't help but think, right, it is right. We should all have this attitude, as I put in my article on our website that was anticipating this document coming through. You know, it's right that we should all care for the poor, you know, in some way or another. But it is like, surely it's about spiritual poverty. That's what Jesus is talking about more than anything else. And that seems to be, like, at the beginning, I thought that that's what he was going to talk about, but it doesn't seem to come across that the answer to everything is the gospel. That doesn't seem to be it. It reads like very Francis-like, in terms that there's a lot of admonishing someone. Don't know, you know, it's not quite clear. And I wrote that I wrote that down, so you'll see it in my analysis document if you're interested in that because I wrote that down a number of times. Like, who's he berating here? Who's he attacking? Who's he accusing of doing this? Like, does the church not feed the poor? Does the church not, you know, do we not give up? Like, even here in our local environment, it's one of the things that the parish is really involved with, is the homeless and looking after people who are sleeping rough. And so, you know, and we contribute to that in lots of different ways. So it feels like he's having a go at and exactly as you said, it feels like he's attacking the people, the faithful, the people who are doing this stuff. Who is he saying? Who is he saying don't do that? I don't understand. Like, we're all sort of and that is a very Francis thing. Throughout the whole of Pope Francis' pontificate, I always felt like, well, who are these rigid priests who hate everyone? And who are, like, who's he having a go at all the time? He was always telling everyone off. And, I just kept putting, and whenever he said anything, I just felt like, well, just give us Jesus. That's what we're here for. We don't want all this rubbish, So it feels, what I was hoping, really, my heart was on fire for, was back to Benedict XVI, where I used to desperately wait for an encyclical to come out and then pour through the honeyed wisdom, and you could find new bits every time you re-looked at it. And I will do that. I have read this. I always read the papal documents, and I will spend more time with this and hopefully learn some more from it. But I'm hoping that it's a transitional thing, Catherine, that this is something that Francis wrote. Leo's made it a bit better by chucking a load of magisterial stuff in it. So there's nothing in it. There isn't anything in it super, worrying or anything like that. There's no gotcha lines or, footnotes like there was in the Morris Letizia or anything. And, it's harmless enough, but the whole beginning bit, I was just like, what are you trying to say with all this? And then there's a few bits at the end, like 3 or 4 paragraphs where I thought, oh, okay, that's worth saying. But did you really need to do, 100 pages before you got to it?
Yeah. Well, you're going to be writing about this in a bit more detail, and as you say, you've gone through the document and you've made notes and you've really thoroughly kind of examined it, and you're going to write for our website. So do please visit catholicunscripted.com, where you will see Mark, in anticipation of this, has published this article, and a new one will come out with some commentary on the content. But we just thought we'd jump in here for a little bit of verbal feedback on the first day of its release. And I was thinking of the words of Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa was invited to America to speak at an American university way back. I don't know if it was Harvard, to give an address. And in the letter that she received, it said, whoever wrote it said something like, to Mother Teresa, you who are in one of the poorest nations, invited to the richest nation in the world. Isn't this wonderful? To kind of introduce her. And she replied, no, I'm in one of the richest nations. You're in the poorest nation because you kill your babies. And that clarity over that impoverishment of a society that would destroy our own babies in the womb, that has to be, even though America might have been the richest country in the world. And I thought Mother Teresa, like all the saints, very simple aphorisms in 1 or 2 words, 1 or 2 sentences, kind of says everything there. Yeah, don't come to me saying I'm in a poor country and you're a rich country if this is how you treat your babies. Like when Hillary Clinton apparently spoke with her and she said, where are all the women, or why aren't there more women in politics or something? And she said, because you killed them all. Something like that. So that kind of clarity, I think, is refreshing, and it's great to hear that he's pointed to the saints. I think that's
he speaks about Mother Teresa, Saint Teresa of Calcutta.
Right.
He says, so I've just managed to pull it up here. He says she's become a universal icon of charity, lived to the fullest extent in favor of the most destitute, those discarded by society. Foundress of the Missionaries of Charity, she dedicated her life to the dying, abandoned on the streets of India. She gathered the rejected, washed their wounds, and accompanied them to the moment of their death with the tenderness of prayer. Her love for the poorest of the poor meant that she did not only take care of their material needs, but also proclaim the good news of the gospel to them. Really, really good bit. And he finishes that bit off that paragraph saying, Teresa did not consider herself a philanthropist or an activist, but a bride of Christ crucified, serving with total love her suffering brothers and sisters. So this is what I mean. It's like it's a document of contradictions in lots of ways, because there are great little bits like this wedged in there, and then some of the rest of it, you're just left scratching your head.
Quick question before we sign off for today. Oh, does it reference Francis a lot, or prior magisterial documents?
Yeah, it's much better, Lisa, in terms of than Francis's documents. In terms of it's got a lot of magisterial stuff. There is a bit of Francis in there, which you would expect, because I think Francis wrote a large portion of it. This is the second part of his project, but notwithstanding that, it has got it's like Leo has gone through it and added a lot of magisterial weight to it. So from that point of view, yeah, it is good.
That's very good. I don't know if you can see my dog down there, my sleeping dog, who's snoring. Oh, I've just woken her up. So if you heard snoring, it wasn't either of us. The document wasn't that boring. It was my dog. So thanks for tuning in for this spontaneous live conversation after Mark read through this new document, the First Apostolic Exhortation from Pope Leo XIV. And tune in to CatholicUnscripted.com. Tune in again. Oh, also, Mark, coming up later is our fantastic conversation with Jacob Phillips. So that will be on our channel, on our YouTube channel, and you will also find it. An advanced copy, early copy, was on our Substack. If you go over there and become a member, you'll get access to it. All our videos ad-free. But it's coming up on our website, CatholicUnscripted.com. Well, it's coming up on our YouTube channel a bit later today, and it's so good. And a lot of what you're saying here is, what does this term even mean, and how are we using this? And is this a modern lens that we're looking through? And is this how we should be looking? Well, all of those kind of things were discussed with Professor Jacob Phillips, and it's very interesting because you said the NHS is really failing people, especially the elderly. Yet we 2 or 3 years ago were deifying the NHS, which is the UK's National Health Service, and we're sort of made to feel you can't criticise the NHS; it's the envy of the world. When the reality is,
anyone really thinks that.
No one really thinks that. But again, the narrative is. And we're just peddled these lies. It's like trust the science, and the Catholic schools are really Catholic. And
well, it's like we were saying to Delphine. We just had that brilliant conversation with Delphine Chewy, didn't we? And that's basically the same thing. It's like you get embedded in this received opinion, and to question the orthodoxy means that you are ostracized by your community. And that was her experience when she worked for high fashion magazines. Yeah. And that's exactly the same. Like the NHS is one of these things that you're not allowed to suggest that there might be a better way of doing it, and yet the whole thing just seems to me to be a complete disaster. I mean, you're like, that's not to say that the good people who work there, like my son had an accident with a power tool a little while ago, as Catherine knows. And once we got it sorted out, they did a brilliant job. The surgeons did a brilliant job. So if you can get seen and navigate all the chaos, then,
if you can't, your hand's falling off. But if you get seen, great. Pot luck. Good people in the NHS, but the system is broken. The school system is broken. So many systems are broken. Yet we've got to keep smiling. People are out on the streets of the UK marching to have their voices heard on immigration. But let's not, they're all bigots. Keep smiling. Don't worry. Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, is going to tell you we love migration and we love immigration, and diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength. Don't forget that, guys. And the Bishops' Conference will also say diversity is our strength. So we have to say diversity is our strength, because if you don't, you're not following the line, and you're not really that Christian either. So all of that, an analysis of all of that, what's behind that, is something that we discussed with Jacob Phillips. So take a look at that later today on this channel. But for now, thanks, Mark, for reading through that document late last night while I was asleep.
Can everyone hit like for the video, because
it helps.
You're doing that, And if you mean this one, BT, this one here, it's Primavera by Botticelli.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining, and tune in later to catch up with our latest video, and we'll be back very soon. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.